10 seconds away.
All right. We don't want to start without recording.
Good to go.
Very good. Well, welcome everybody to Parashat HaShavua. This is a week in which we will be studying Baha'alotecha, and I want to focus on a very small little passage that happens to be of extraordinary importance. So I hope that you'll find it interesting. Lots of commentary with it. So as we are going to engage with words of Torah, we say the blessing, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise are you, Adonai, our God, creator of the universe, who has sanctified us with mitzvot and have instructed us to engage with words of Torah. So I hope everyone is well. You excited about this week's Torah portion? Okay, I mean, it has a lot of stuff in it. We have Israelites complaining because they didn't have enough meat. We had lots of back and forth with Moses and the people. But I want to focus on a very small little passage in chapter 10. And in fact, it includes the what many of the commentators say is a book within a book. So instead of we say the 5 books of the Torah, they say, no, there's a 6th book, and this is it. You get to read the 6th book all to yourselves. So let's see what we're talking about. So it starts off with, we're going to be at the 29th verse of chapter 10, with Moses making an appeal to his father-in-law. His father-in-law is called Yitro, but it also has the name Hobab and also Ruel. And which is confusing, not only to us, because, well, who is it? Is his name Yitro or Hobab, or is he Ruel? So the commentators also wrestle with this, saying, well, wait a minute, how come he has different names? Is it a different person, etc.? But at the heart of the Moses' appeal is for Yitro, who is a Midianite. And not just a Midianite. Who remembers what his job was with the Midianites? Yitro was a Kohen. He was their priest. So he was the priest of the Canaanite people, at least of that tribe of it. And Moses married his daughter, Zipporah. And Yitro had been very, very important to Moses in developing his own leadership. Yitro had seen what Moses had done in trying to take on all the responsibilities to adjudicate every one of the cases. And Yitro said, you know what, you're going to be overwhelmed. And it's not good for you. It's not good for the people to have a bottleneck of all of the cases all just come to you. Moses, you need to have people who will help you administer not only the law, but also the state, this caravan of hundreds of thousands of people coming through the wilderness. So Yitro gave him some very sharp and good advice. Certainly Yitro, who had, as a Midianite priest, was very familiar with this area. This was not Moses' prime territory, although he had been, again, the son-in-law of Yitro, and therefore had shepherded this territory, so knew a little bit about it, but not to the extent as that his father-in-law had. And so he makes an appeal to him, and it gets to a topic that is dear to me, and I hope dear to you as well. And that is when we have our loved ones, those who are a part of our family, who are not Jewish, to have the to have the generosity of heart, and also the concern that at least to welcome them, to say, if you want to be a part of our Jewish family, please know that we would be honored. And we get very shy about that, because in Judaism, the Jewish people have always been shy about missionizing, because we don't like to be missionized ourselves. But sometimes we're too shy, and it's all right to look out and to say to someone, we'd be honored to have you as a part of our Jewish family. Well, that's what Moses is about to do. And since I made this screen really large for Alan Markman and the crew, this is the Alan Markman rule. I'm going to make it even larger now. Again, what do you think, Alan? Can you read this?
She's going to Marshall, but she asked if we want.
Alan, do you
Very, very good. Very good.
Okay. Go ahead.
Moses said to Hobab, son of Ruel, the Midianite, Moses' father-in-law, we're setting out for the place of which Adonai has said, I will give it to you. Come with us and we will be generous with you, for Adonai has promised to be generous to Israel.
So in this case, it's not obvious that he just says, come join our people, but rather just don't leave us, be with us. But the commentators, they took it in a different way. Alan, go ahead and continue with what Rashi has to say.
Rashi said, Chovav is identical with Jethro, as it is said in Judges, of the son of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses.
So the first thing that Rashi is addressing is the fact that it says, the Yomer Moshe lechovav, right?
Yes.
And so we're introduced to his father-in-law as with a new name. Instead of Yitro, it's Chovav. Here it is again, Choten Moshe, the father-in-law of Moses. So Rashi says, no, it's the same person. Don't worry about it. And thus, Choten Moshe in our verse is connected with Chovav and not with Ruel Hamidiani. Okay, go ahead and continue with that part then.
Immediately preceding, but why does it state in Exodus 2:18, and they, the daughter of Jethro, came to Ruel, their father, since he was their grandfather and not their father? It teaches us that the children are in the habit of calling their grandfather by the term father. He, Jethro, was called by several names. Jethro because he added it, though it was through him there was added a section of the Torah, that is 18:21. He was called Chovav because he loved Chovav, the Torah, etc.
Okay, so that's Rashi's first explanation is it's the same person. And what about as that people sometimes call grandfather father? Has that ever happened?
Not that I know of.
No. Well, some of us have. Have you ever had a grandpa called Papa?
Yeah, of course.
Well, what's Papa?
Father.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not unusual for us, even in the 21st century, to see the grandfather as the patriarch of the family and refer to him as such. So that was maybe it's a little bit of a stretch, but we have different names for the same person with some frequency in the Torah, and Rashi's trying to find a way to explain that away. A modern scholar might look at that and say, no, what we have here are two different narratives that have been stitched together. And again, these were kept orally until they were brought together. And it gets us to the point then you would say, well, wait a minute, if they were stitched together by some redactor, some editor, well, why didn't he just correct the names? Right? Why did he maintain the differences of the names? And the response is that, well, there was great respect for the integrity, the authenticity of those different traditions. And they would rather live with the inconsistencies of one individual being called by two or even three different names than they would be more comfortable keeping the inconsistencies than trying to resolve them all by erasing them and altering and changing these ancestral texts. And so we're left then with some evidence of it. So you could buy it on either way. On one hand, that they were different narratives that were stitched together, and therefore we have some in which he's called Chovav and some he's called Yitro, etc. Or you can say that no, Rashi's correct. Sometimes different people have different names. What do we call the prime minister of Israel? What's his name?
Bibi.
Bibi.
Bibi. Is it Bibi? Is that his name, Bibi?
No,
What's his name?
that's his nickname,
But what's his name?
Benjamin Netanyahu,
Right. So why do we call him Bibi?
because that's his nickname.
Ah, okay. So now 1,000 years from now, 2,000 years from now, someone will be reading the accounts and they'll go, well, this Bibi character is different from this Netanyahu character. And so, right. So we can see both sides of that. So let me get back to the text. Here's Nachmanides, who has his own take on it. Who would like to read from Nachmanides?
I will.
Thank you.
Spain and Eretz Yisrael, and Moses said unto Chobab, I have already explained that Chobab of the root Chavav, love, was the new name for which they gave to Jethro when he converted to the Torah of Israel. For such is the way of all proselytes. For he calls his servants by another name. Now Moses had begged him to go with them and had told him without explanation, and we will do thee good. But Chobab thought that they would give him of the spoil, silver and gold, garments, sheep and herd, but that he would not have an inheritance among them in the land. Therefore he did not want to go with them. And he answered, but I will depart to my own land and to my kindred, since there I have an inheritance, wealth, and honor. So Moses told him, leave us not, I pray thee, for because of your familiarity with the wilderness, thou shalt be to us instead of eyes. In other words, a guide in the conquest of the lands, and you will show us the way by which we must go up, and of all the goodness the Eternal shall do unto us, the same will do unto thee. Moses thus hinted that he would be given an inheritance in the good land as a reward for his trouble, and help that he would extend to them in the conquest of the land.
In my opinion.
In my opinion, Chobab consented to this offer, and he did so as Moses requested of him, as I have mentioned there. And so the rabbi said with Yerushalmi, the children of
the Yerushalmi is the Talmud of the land of Israel.
The children of the Canaanite, Moses' father-in-law, bring first fruits, and read the section of the first fruits wherein it is stated, I have brought the first of the fruit of the soil, which thou, O Eternal, hath given me, because it is written, come thou with us, and we will do thee good.
Okay, so let's, I know it's a long passage from Rambam. Anybody can unpack that for us? What exactly was he saying? Thank you, Jerry. What was he saying? So Yitro was this Midianite Kohen. He already had his place. He had his people, right? He had a job. He had his land. He had his other daughters and grandchildren and all the rest. So Moses saying, come with us. Yitro would say, no, that's not my place. I'll take my share because I've helped this people, and you've obviously you got some of the spoils from Egypt, etc. And so I'll take my share, but I have my place, right? Anybody who's tried to convince a parent or a grandparent to leave where they've lived for most of their lives and say, won't you be much more comfortable living with me or living near us? And they go, well, no, maybe, but.
Yeah, but they also said that Yitro was afraid of not being given a part of the land.
Exactly. Why? So the land is being parceled out to the tribes of Israel. So Ephraim is over here, Manasseh is over there, Dan's over there, Judah's over there, Reuben is over there. So they each have their tribal lands. And he's saying, well, wait a minute, where am I? What am I going to get? Right? So what was when Nachmanides made a response, he made reference to a passage in the Yerushalmi, and we'll get to another Talmudic passage and later on that reinforces this. What did the Yerushalmi say?
He said that Yitro knew he had land in his homeland where he came from.
They made reference to those who were bringing the bikurim, the first fruit offerings. And among those who brought the first fruit offerings were the Canaanites, right? Who were the Canaanites? The Canaanites were a part of the Israelite people who came through Yitro, through Chobab, i.e. they did have a land holding. They were a part of our people. And so that's a whole piece of this, I don't know, of this experience of becoming a part of a family, a tribe, the tribe of the Jewish people, to help them feel that it's not just that you are joining it, but you are becoming a part of it. You are a co-owner. This is your people. Yeah, go ahead, Margie.
Well, and it's just that he mentioned inheritance, his fear that he wouldn't have any inheritance or honor. And I guess that was the way to try to combat that and say, no, that's not true, you would.
Right. And it's not to say that there's not a distance that has to be navigated by those who join a people, and especially one as ancient and as tight as the Jewish people. If you come from a non-Jewish background, can be the language, there's the familiarity with the traditions, the holidays, the cultural references. And so you can feel a little bit of an outsider. Now, we're, of course, talking 2,000 years after the independence of Israel was overwhelmed by Rome. And so we now have in the modern land of Israel, Jewish homeland, but for Rashi, as he mentioned it, and then Nachmanides, as he mentioned it in the 13th century in France, their experience was totally different. It wasn't about land holding. It was, can I feel connected to this people, right? Can this people be my people? And the response was yes, you do have it. Your offering is just as sacred, is just as precious. But it just at least acknowledges the movement that has to be made. Go ahead, Arnie.
Just an aside, in our modern reform, can you be part of this community if you don't convert? I'm just curious.
Well, absolutely, yes. And I hope that's not only the reform movement, but I think it's especially the reform movement where we've been very inclusive and welcoming. So that when you're in a group and we're practicing Judaism and you're not of that religious faith, right? There are certain things that you wouldn't do because you don't buy them. You're not into that. That's not reflective of your religious expression. So for someone who's not Jewish, for them to lead a Torah service or to lead any service for that matter, I mean, you have to be at least part of that religious experience and call it your own if we're going to be a leader of it, right? But with the exception of the religious leadership, just about everything else is a part of our collective. So I can't say this definitively, but I'm pretty sure that just about every family at Temple Sinai has loved ones who are not Jewish. And when those loved ones come to services or come to a class or come to participate in anything, they are welcomed as a part of our family. So does that answer that, Arnie? I'm not sure.
Yeah, very much so. The reason I'm asking that is that among the Hasidim, I'm using that as a broad category, because I grew up not in that community, but very tight with that community. The practice used to be one of the children married outside the religion, they sat shiva for him. Is that still the practice?
There
I mean,
are,
that just-
for some, yes, and it's not. By the way, there are some Jewish groups that are very, very insular, and it's not just the Hasidim. I'll give you one example, and that'd be the Iranian Sephardic community in Los Angeles, or the Syrian Sephardic community. I mean, some of them are very, very tight. And if you're an Ashkenazic Jew, you come from, European background, and you want to date one of these Jews who are from Iranian Sephardic background, they will say no, that's not happening, right? That's not possible. And if they continue with that relationship, there will be some drama. Let's put it that way. There'll be drama on all sides. So I think people tend to be sort of insular within their own social group. I grew up strictly middle class, right? I know that some of you grew up very, very wealthy with silver spoons in your mouth, especially Jerry. So, but for those of us who grew up pretty middle class, when we went to, social gathering of people who had considerable means, didn't you feel awkward?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That somehow I'm not good enough, or I don't have their experience, and you were acutely aware that you were not of their social circle. You didn't belong to country clubs. You didn't go to travel and have some of the advantages that they had, and you didn't. You sort of felt that, I'm not the in crowd here. We may all be of the same faith, but we're not on the in crowd. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I think that's where, yeah.
That
Anyone
would-
else? Go ahead,
Oh,
Jerry.
yeah. I have, I think, doesn't the bylaws of Temple Sinai say that you can't be a member of the Board of Trustees if you're not Jewish?
Right. So again, it's the leadership of the Jewish community. I mean, we're a synagogue. The leadership of the Jewish community, at least if you're going to be a leader, you should be of that community, right? But that's not a function of the program participation or class participation or anything else. But if you're going to be a leader of a group, I mean, the first step would be to actually be a part to be one of them, right? Margie, and then Alan, please.
What about just being on the bima during bar bat mitzvah? A grandmother who's not Jewish, but
Yeah.
very involved with the lives.
Yeah, no problem with me. I mean, at Temple Sinai,
Yeah.
I have not only the non-Jewish parent up, but I have the grandparents up. I welcome them not only to the bima, but I will help them as we pass the Torah from generation to generation, because I understand it at least from my reading of it, the grandchild is receiving that Torah because there's a sense of cooperation and respect from all the people who are participating. And so when we have non-Jewish grandparents or aunts and uncles and cousins, I try to find a role for all of them during the bar bat mitzvah service. Not reading Torah, not saying the blessing over Torah, because again, when you say the blessing over the Torah, it's a leadership role. Literally saying Baruch Hu et Adonai, it's a command form. It's the imperative. Come, you bless. You are now, as the one who's reciting that blessing, a part of the religious leadership, and the community responds to you. Then ultimately says Amen. But there are other parts of the service in which that's not the case, including opening ark doors and undressing the Torah, but also including the recitation of special prayers of peace for our country and for other meditations and expressions that are perfectly lovely. So they can participate in the service, but they can't do the Jewish ritual because that you have to be Jewish to be a part of the Jewish ritual. Alan.
Yes, I made the mistake when I was active in the Minyan, the Saturday morning Minyan, and asked Jeff Tucker to come for an Aliyah, bless the Torah. And at the time, I think he was still in the conversion stage. He wasn't Jewish yet. And Rabbi Elrav brought it to my attention that you made a mistake. I mean, he didn't chastise me or anything, but let me know that that wasn't something that should have been done.
Yeah. Well, we learn, right? But again, Jeff was in the process of becoming anyway. So that's
and he was coming to Minyan every week. I thought I was a regular Jewish man. He is now, but he wasn't then.
right. Yeah. Alan, what was your Alan?
Words.
Back at Emmanuel, Kanta Sachs, she taught facilitated the Talmud, and every time she came across a word ignoramus, I did not like that, the word ignoramus, because when I grew up, ignoramus, it wasn't a minority. Your IQ wasn't particularly high, so every time she would mention that, I say, I just had an ignoramus sighting,
Yeah.
I just don't like that word.
Right.
That refers to the lower class.
Right. No, I understand that it seems to be a class-based thing, and also it's pretty. I think it's not a great translation either, because the term that she's probably translating is Am Haaretz, and an Am Haaretz was not necessarily an ignoramus, but was rather one who simply was not of the rabbinic class, which is also a class distinction. Speaking of which, we got another rabbi with her, Rabbi David Zucker. So welcome to him. So as he's finding his way in, let's go back to our text. We've covered now 2 verses. So now we're in. Now we've got one more verse, and this is Yitro Chobab's response. And so, Margie, you want to read this?
Sure. Yeah. I will not go, he replied to him, but will return to my native land.
The Yitro responds, I'm not going to go with you. I'm going to go back. But we're going to see what Rashi and then Or HaChaim have to say.
Okay. And he said to him, I will not go, but I will depart to mine own land and to my kindred. The Hebrew may be translated, but for my own land and for my own kindred, I must go. I must go, whether for the sake of my property or the sake of my family. So that in his old age, he would not have to adjust to the different climate and food in a country he had not grown up in.
So Rashi tries to find an excuse that Yitro didn't want to go back because he felt a loyalty to his family, his people, etc. Sforno brings up what I had mentioned earlier, that sometimes we make the invitation to grandparents to move to join us in Colorado, and it's like, oh, the altitude is, and I have a hard time with the breathing, and then it's dry, and I don't know where all the stores are and all the rest. And so I know I had to go through that. And then finally, Or HaChaim here, if you will.
Sure. But I will rather go to my own country. Why did Yitro have to say, seeing he had already said that he would not?
Elech means I will go.
I will go. Okay. Seeing he had already said that he would not go with the Israelites. Perhaps this can be explained on the basis of Makilta in Exodus 18:27, where Moses let his father-in-law depart. Rabbi Joshua said that Moses allowed Yitro to depart from the most honored place in the world, from the presence of the Lord as displayed in the tabernacle. Rabbi Eliezer the Modai claimed that before he departed, Yitro said to Moses, light is effective only in a place of darkness. He meant that.
He meant that among the
Among the
Israelites.
Israelites, he was not needed to provide enlightening, seeing Israel basked in the light of God and his own country.
God,
However,
in the light of God. And then in
Okay.
his own country, however,
his new found enlightenment could be of benefit to his countrymen. There, he might succeed in converting his countrymen to monotheism, and then he would bring them to study. In the event we might think that Yitro went home and did not convert his countrymen, look at what is written in the book of Judges 1:16, where the members of the Kenite, Yitro's clan, are reported as having come from the city of Jericho to join the tribe of Yehuda to live in the neighborhood of Arad, part of the desert of Yehuda. It appears from the working of the Mechilta that
the Mechilta is a collection of midrashim.
Okay, that Rabbi Joshua was of the opinion that Yitro did not convert, and that this was the reason Moses consented that he would leave.
Kavodo Shalom, with the so he would have eternal glory, leave God's presence.
Okay, the environment
Right.
in which God's presence predominated.
On the other hand,
Rabbi Eliezer and Modi believed that Yitro did indeed convert to Judaism. The extraneous word,
Elech, I will go,
can be explained satisfactorily according to either of these two views. According to Rabbi Joshua, Yitro told Moses, I will not go, but I will go to my country. Should you think this is only because I prefer my country over the land of Canaan, this is not so, even granted that what you have to offer me is attractive. Nonetheless, I will go back to my country. According to Rabbi Eliezer, we must read Yitro's remark as follows. I will not go at this stage, but will return to my country in order to convert my countrymen. At a later stage,
Elech,
I will go and join you, as per the report in the book of Judges.
And then finally, one last piece.
The reason that Yitro mentioned both my country and my birthplace is that he implied that if he failed to convert all his countrymen to Judaism, at least he was certain he could convert all the people in his hometown.
Right. So now we have differences of opinion. Rabbi Joshua over here, Rabbi Eliezer over there, as to did he convert or did he not convert? What did he mean by he's going to go back to his home? And so that the commentator, or Achayim, as this later day commentator brought them together, he wanted us to look that there's not a clear answer as to what Yitro ultimately did. And it sort of leaves it to us as to wrestle with it. And perhaps it puts the question to us as to how we respond in reaching out to our friends and loved ones. So what do you think? You think, I mean, on one hand, Yitro said, I'm going to go back, right? Arnie just like, I'm going to go back. On the other hand, the book of Judges seems to see that the Kenites, the tribe of Yitro, are part of Israel. Go ahead, Arnie.
Just a quick question. His daughter, the bride, did she convert?
Tzipporah?
Yes.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. If you ask, the biblical scholars, they'll say there was not an official ritual for conversion until the latter days. Now, we can point to certain passages in the Torah which seem to indicate that once the person believed in God, as the only God, if there were men, that they were circumcised, that they were a part of our ritual, they're part of our rite, they would be welcomed at the Passover table. But there's no mention of an official ritual that they had to go here and here and there. That came later. We have some reference to it, of course, in the book of Ruth, which may be a relatively early text, but it's regardless. in which it seems to be exactly that she is saying, your God is my God, your people are my people, where you go, Elech, I will go, right? So that term is very important, because it's what Yitro said, where you go, I will go. But Ruth meant, I'm going to go with you, Naomi. I'm going to go with you and your people. They are now my people. That seems to be conversion, but was there official ritual with that? Or was that just a natural coming together? And so I think the weight of the opinion is probably that since there's not a ritual, official ritual that is described, that it was much more of an informal gathering, especially if someone who was a woman coming into the man's household. That woman would have been understood in the ancient world to have been a part of that man's religious household. That's not the case later on, in which it was the woman's faith that made the difference in Judaism. So Jerry, go ahead, and then some other thoughts too.
Yeah, it's just that at that particular time, was there any such thing as a ritual conversion?
Well, that's what I was saying, that the weight of opinion currently is that no, we don't have evidence of it. So therefore, it may have been much more informal. By the way, we don't have a great description of an official ritual for marriage. It's not like here's the wedding ceremony. We don't find a wedding ceremony in the Torah. They went into their tent, and that's what Mazel tov.
You mean the Israelites didn't have a ring?
Well, there was an exchange of gifts, right? But it wasn't necessarily a ring for the finger. It could have been it could be an earring, a nose ring, but there was absolutely an exchange of some gifts. We find that when both Rebecca and then when Rachel and Leah were wed, that there was an exchange of gifts, but or at least a promise to work for it, as Jacob had to. But for Rebecca, there was gifts given, and therefore that was the bride's price. But there was not an official wedding ceremony. We didn't have that. We didn't see it.
I was going to say, please, that, and Rabbi Zucker will be aware of this, I think. I know him when he was in his former position. You don't have to go outside the country to have this problem. You just have to move your parent to a nursing home. And, I don't want the cooking. I'm leaving my atmosphere I like. And so it could be local to the situation.
Right. So, Rabbi Zucker, at Shalom Park, you certainly saw a lot of that transition as well. Alan Markman wanted to share, and then maybe Rabbi Zucker, I wanted to see if you had anything more about the ancient rituals of weddings and et cetera. Go ahead.
Is there any evidence anywhere that Yitro did come back to the clan of Moses?
Right. Well, those were the passages that we read that made reference to in Judges, that here are these Canaanites who are bringing the Bikurim, the first fruits, who are a part of the territory of Arad in Judah. And we're going to see another passage in the Talmud as well that makes reference to that they were a part of the land of Israel. So yes, so if their people were there, that they ultimately were there.
You also have an example in chapter 4 in the book of Judges, which tells the story about Jael, who is married to a Kenite, and there clearly seems to be, at the very least, close relations, that they are allies. So that the Kenites did associate with the Israelites.
Right.
But in answer to your question about, do we have any rituals, whether it's conversion rituals or marriage rituals, that we can pick up from the Bible? No, Rabbi Rheins is absolutely correct that there's nothing which sets out, you do this, this, and this to join the Jewish people, or you do this, this, and this to marry A to B. So that's all post biblical and to a certain extent even post-Talmudic traditions which develop over a period of time.
Right. Now we have ketubot that date back early. So there was something that developed. But again, the Bible, the Torah specifically, makes reference to an era 3,000 years ago. Here's an interesting deal. The whole idea with the ketubah, for instance, it far predates the state's license. Nowadays, I can't have the ketubah signed and do the wedding ceremony until I have the state license. But the ketubah in Jewish tradition predated by thousands of years the whole idea of a nation, let alone of a municipality that would try to control any of it. So we can see the roots, the beginnings of those institutions that are that come through certainly the Bible and the Talmud, with the creation of things like the rituals for ceremonies, and that you needed witnesses and it had to be signed, and all of the negotiations of two families coming together for a wedding, etc. All of that had to be documented, and those documents we do have. We have copies of them that date back a couple of thousand years. So it's a forerunner of the ultimate bureaucracy of the city clerk. So let's get back to our text. Now we have 2 more verses. So who would like to read this passage? One last plea by Moses to Yitro.
Read.
Moses said, "Please do not leave us, inasmuch as you know where we should camp in the wilderness and can be our guide. So if you come with us, we will extend to you the same bounty that Adonai grants us."
Right, and that's the final word of this little pericope, that Yitro had intended to go back to his people, and Moses says, "You will have the same bounty." And that's we'll have Rashi's passage on this, and we sort of covered this passage well enough. I wanted to get to this next little section, but it looks like that he did very much join us. So let me get to this next little piece here, and now this is the marching of the ark. If I can get this over to the wrong side. There we go. There we go. So Rabbi, why don't you read this verses 33 and 34.
They marched from the mountain of Adonai a distance of 3 days. The ark of the covenant of Adonai traveled in front of them on that 3 days' journey to seek out a resting place for them. And Adonai's cloud kept above them by day, and they moved on from camp.
Now it's a strange little thing here. Look at this little section, this right here. I'm highlighting it. The Ark of the Covenant of Adonai traveled in front of them 3 days, and it was seeking a place for them to go, as if the Ark would travel by itself 3 days in advance. And the commentators focus on that because it's sort of bizarre, right? And what is that ark? And how could that ark be 3 days ahead of them if the other ark is with us? Are there 2 arks? So let's see what this is from Sifrei on, again, a collection of Midrashim. So Rabbi, you want to go ahead and read that?
Sure. And they journeyed from the mountain of Adonai a journey of 3 days. Is it not written in the book of Deuteronomy, 11 days from Horeb until Kadesh Barnea? What then is the intent of, and they journeyed a journey of 3 days? They traveled on a 3-day journey, and the Shekhinah preceded them so that they could enter the land immediately. It is the way of men who go to war that when they start, they rejoice, and the longer they exert themselves, the more they weaken. Not so with Israel. The more they exert themselves, the more they rejoice. And they say, let us go and inherit Eretz Yisrael. And for instance, in Joshua 4:10, and the people hastened and they crossed the Jordan. Our fathers said, once they sinned, it was decreed against them, quotation from Numbers 14:29, and in this desert will your carcasses fall. But we will not sin and die and go inherit Eretz Yisrael, Numbers 10:33. And the ark of the covenant of Adonai preceded them. The ark that preceded them contained the broken tablets.
We'll move this
But
up.
the ark,
But the other ark,
where do we go here? All right, but the other ark containing the tablets moved in the midst of the encampments, as it is written in Numbers 14:44, and the ark of the covenant of Moses and the Adonai did not stir from the midst of the camp. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says, it is not written, and the ark of Adonai, but and the ark of the covenant of Adonai.
Right.
An analogy. A viceroy precedes his army to prepare a campground for them. And thus does the Shekhinah precede Israel, to look out a resting place for them. That is the intent of Numbers 21:1. And the Canaanite heard the king of Arad that Israel was coming by way of Atarim, etc. When they heard that Aaron had died, they said, the high priest has died, and their great lookout has gone, and the pillar of cloud that waged war for them, this is the time to go and fight with them. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said, it is a great degradation for Israel to say in Deuteronomy, let us send out men before us and let them spy out the land for us. The Adonai said to them, if when you were in the land of desert and pit, I looked out the way for you, how much more so when you're entering a good broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey.
Right. So, and it's sort of convoluted, but thank you. And I'm sort of having to play with the text. When I was typing the translation, I messed up there. Anyway, so there was the tablet with the ark with the broken tablets. It proceeded as if with the Shekhinah, God's spiritual connection to us, proceeded 3 days in advance to sort of say, okay, Israel, you're going to go over here, you're going to go over here, etc. As if they were the scouting out the way for us, which was again part of our sin. In that one day Moses sent out scouts when he didn't need to send out scouts. We had that miracle ark that was going to go in our stead. But it's a very strange little piece because they come up with these explanations as to, wait a minute, the ark traveled 3 days in advance. You wouldn't let the ark of the covenant go 3 days in advance. It would be vulnerable. But no, the one with the good tablets, that's back in the camp, guarded by everybody. The broken one, it went out ahead, and it had God's special protection. So a very fanciful answer for a very confusing section in the Torah, and it precedes what happens to be the 6th book of the Torah. One of the most unique little passages. And when you read the Torah itself, you'll have a nun and an inverted nun with these 85 letters that come next in the text. And I'm going to get to that one real quick because I think it's a very fascinating section. So here's what it looks like somewhat in the Torah. There's a nun here, a nun here, I'll make it bold, and a nun here, right? You can see that the samach means that it's set aside in the Torah. When you write a Torah, it has its own place in its gap. The shishi means that it is the 6th reading of the Torah of the aliyot, and here is that passage. Lo vayhi b'nesoah ha'aron v'yomer Moshe. Kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha v'yanusu misanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. So, and we've made that a part of our liturgy as well. And this little passage here is understood to be its own book of the Torah. And there's a wonderful explanation for it, because what do you mean it's a book of the Torah? It's only a couple of verses. It's 85 letters How can that be a whole book? And so we read together, when the ark was set out, Moses would say, advance, right? Kumu Adonai, advance, O Adonai. May your enemies be scattered and may your foes flee before you. And when it halted, he would say, return, Adonai, you who are Israel's myriads of thousands, which is awesome. Shuva Adonai, Ravavot Alfei Yisrael. So here's this passage again from Sifrei, not an easy section, but Rabbi, you want to continue with that one because it's a terrific little section.
Sure, and it was, read that part.
Yes.
So in Numbers 10:35 it says, and it was when the ark traveled. There are signs, inverted nuns, before this verse and after the next verse. Rebbe says, because it is a book in itself, whence they ruled, a Torah scroll which was erased, and there remained 85 letters, as in the section, and it was when the ark traveled, imparts tuma to the hands, a rabbinical enactment. In the Talmud, Shabbat 14a, Rabbi Shimon says, there are signs before and after, because this is not its place. What should have been written?
Now, this is sort of an amazing thing. What Rabbi Shimon in Tractate Shabbat is saying is that this little passage here, Kumu Adonai, rise up, O God, in advance, that it really shouldn't be here. He's doing some critical biblical analysis. It shouldn't be here, but it was stuck here for an important reason. So the idea that, oh, no, it was, our ancestors were slavishly under the impression that all of the Torah was given at Mount Sinai in this perfect order. No, there was some playing around with the text for a good reason. Let's see what it said. You know what? I want to go ahead. And they traveled.
And they traveled with the mountain of the Adonai, a journey of 3 days. And the ark of the covenant of the Adonai preceded them a distance of 3 days. And the people were as seekers of a pretext, an analogy. Some men say to the king, would you please accompany us to the governor of Akko? They arrive at Akko. He has gone to Tyre. They arrive at Tyre. He has gone to Sidon. They arrive at Sidon. He has gone to Antiochia. They arrive at Antiochia. Some start complaining against the king for having put all of this to trouble. It is the king who should complain for having been put to all this trouble for their sakes. Similarly, on the day the Shekhinah traveled a 3 days journey so that they could immediately enter Eretz Yisrael, and they began to complain before him for having been put out to all of that trouble. It is as if God, if anyone, who should have complained, for it was for their sakes that the Shekhinah was thus constrained.
So I want to get to this passage. This is the passage in Shabbat, in Tractate Shabbat. Rav Huna Bar Chaluk said, raised a dilemma before Rav Nachman. With regard to a Torah scroll, in which there's not enough to compile from it 85 complete letters written properly and in order, which is the minimum measure determined by the sages for a Torah to maintain the sanctity of a Torah, as in the portion of this section. So this section defines now that we just read with the inverted nuns, 85 letters then sets the criteria for what makes a Sefer Torah sacred, i.e. it brings tuma. It can bring, you shouldn't touch it under profane circumstances. So therefore, this passage declares that this text, even though it only claims it contains 85 letters, is still of the sacred quality. Rav Nachman said to him, and raised a dilemma with regard to the portion when the ark traveled itself. Does one rescue it on Shabbat? I.e., if this sacred text is burning on Shabbat, if it's a sacred text, I should risk life and limb to get it and violate Shabbat. But if it's not a sacred text, let it burn. And it said, and when the ark is traveled is incomplete, it's not a dilemma for me since it contains names of God. Even though there are not 85 letters in it, it is rescued. However, in the case where there is a dilemma for me is regard to a Torah scroll in which there is not enough to compile even 85 letters. What is its ruling? Is it rescued on Shabbat or not? Rabbi Nachman said it is not rescued. So what they are bringing here is this little section, 85 letters of God, this 85 letters section, this own little book, set out the criteria for what was the minimum standard, with the exception being that even if you didn't have 85 letters, if something had the name of God, Yud He Vav He on it, that it should be rescued. It had its sanctity. That little piece set aside. Anybody get why there was a speculation as to maybe this was placed out of order, that it didn't belong here? What was it separating? Let me get back to the text. I'm sorry. I went too far ahead. I apologize. So he said, Rabbi Shimon said, there are signs before and after this because this is not its place. What should have been written, and they traveled from the mountain of Adonai a journey of 3 days. So if you read this week's Torah portion, they're complaining to Moses, right? They're in the wilderness. They're complaining to Moses about food, right? Right after this section, they're complaining to Moses about food, right? So the commentators say this little section with inverted nuns came in here so that we didn't have two sections in the row of Israelites complaining to Moses about food. I thought that was pretty awesome. Go ahead, Arnie.
Yeah, a simple question. I understand then any 85 letters from anywhere in the Torah, if that's still intact, that Torah is considered still intact, basically, right, in terms of its Tuma and Torah, right?
Right. I'll give you a glimpse. Look in our ark, right? Our ark. We have a Pasul Torah, right? It's missing most of its passages. They weren't erased. They were torn away. And so we can't read it because it's not kosher. But then again, it's not disposable either, because it contains 85 letters and it contains the word of God. So therefore, if we were to dispose of it, we had to do so with the most respectful way, which is to bury it, right? So when you have something that you loved that is no longer viable, you don't just dispose of it, you bury it respectfully. And so that's what they're saying here. Good, Alan, and then whomever. Alan, you're muted.
Is there any reason why in the Torah service in the Mishkan Tefillah that Vayehi bin Soharon is not included?
A ta'ut. It was a mistake. It was dumb. How's that?
I just remember it so well.
I know. It should be. It was in the old gates of prayer, and I don't know why they didn't include it. It just is ridiculous. They have a lot of things in there that aren't worthy, and they left that one out. What can I do? David just shrugged his shoulders.
No, I thought that was a good answer.
Right. Well, we've been through this. I mean, in our lifetime, we've had Union Prayer Book, the Gauge of Prayer, and Mishkan, and I think there's some improvements from in each one, but there's also some
shortcomings.
Yeah, shortcomings, and Mishkan has some serious shortcomings, but that's a different. But there's a lot of good things there too. Anything else? Anyway, so it's an interesting Torah portion, beginning with, light your lamp, light the light, which then of course Yitro makes reference to is you already have your light, you don't need me, I'm gonna go back to my people. Reaching out to those who are not of our Israelite descent and saying, you are our family, be with us. And it's not like, we're gonna it's not just that we have something special to offer. Please know that we will feel privileged. We will be honored. We will be benefited. We need you. We want you. And that's important too. It's not just, it's better on our side, so come join the best team. When you love someone, recognize that they are a gift, that they're a blessing, and say, our lives will all be better because of you. And we want you to be with us. And we hope you'll feel the same. And that's not to mean that we should all go off missionizing, but neither shall we stop offering a home, a spiritual home, a loving, supportive home for our loved ones who aren't Jewish. So there you go.
There's one other reason why this is a very nice Torah portion, and that's because it's my bar mitzvah Torah portion.
Good boy. Are you reading? Are you going to be reading Torah this Shabbat morning?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be at taking my son to rabbinic school, and I'm going to see on the way. He's in Cincinnati. I'm going to take him to Cincinnati by way of Indianapolis and see my mom for the first time in a year and a half.
Oh, nice.
That'll
Nice.
be very nice. There'll be hugs and kisses.
Good.
All right, everybody. Mwah.
Rabbi, I know you have a funeral going, so I won't delay you, but I'm going to send you an email. I have a question to ask.
Very good, sir. Please do, and I'll respond. And Lisa, I'll give you a call too. All right, guys.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.